Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Brush Up Your Shakespeare, where we make Shakespeare fun and easy, the way it was always meant to be. This is episode 16, and today we will be covering three scenes from Hamlet. We are now in Hamlet Act 4, and the scenes we will cover are 1, 2, and 3. Now that Hamlet has murdered Polonius as he hid behind the arras in the queen's chambers, the momentum really starts to pick up. The next three scenes reflect that momentum by being rather short, so they go off bang, bang, bang. Not only is the plot of the play picking up momentum, Shakespeare is structuring the play to reflect that momentum. In Act 4, Scene 1, Queen Gertrude finds her husband Claudius and reports what has just transpired in her chambers. And here is the title slide for the show tonight, Hamlet Act 4, Scenes 1 through 3. And the queen says, "Ah, mine own lord, what have I seen tonight?" The king says, "What, Gertrude? How does Hamlet?" The queen says, "Mad as the sea and wind, when both contend which is the mightier. In his lawless fit, behind the arras, hearing something stir, whips out his rapier, cries, 'A rat,' and in this brainish apprehension or deranged misconception, in this brainish apprehension kills the unseen good old man." In other words, he kills Polonius. Claudius recognizes he could have met the same fate had he been hiding with Polonius as he did in a previous scene. And Claudius says, "Oh, heavy deed! It had been so with us had we been there." Now that us is the royal we. What he's saying is, I would have been killed too if I'd been hiding behind the arras instead of Polonius or with Polonius. But Claudius also recognizes he bears some of the fault because he let Hamlet wander free in spite of his madness and the violence that could have been foreseen. Like many modern politicians, Claudius is concerned how this will be viewed by his subjects, the citizens of Denmark. And he has good reason to, as we shall see. Claudius's position as king seems to be on shaky footing with the citizenry, and the citizenry seem to have a good deal of power over whom their king shall be. In other words, Claudius's negligence in letting Hamlet run free and kill Polonius may have a very real impact on his ability to continue being the king. Claudius asks where Hamlet is now, and Gertrude tells him he went to drag off Polonius's body somewhere. Claudius is now convinced he made the right move in deciding to ship Hamlet off to England with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and moves the timetable up to packing Hamlet off at dawn. Claudius calls upon Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to locate Hamlet, speak fair to him, and bring Claudius's body into the chapel. And that ends Act 4, Scene 1. I told you these scenes were short. But before we rush off to Scene 2, we have to note what Gertrude did and did not tell her husband, Claudius. Remember the huge gamble that Hamlet took in the last scene, telling his mother that his madness was only pretended and for her to not tell Claudius? Well, apparently, his gamble paid off. Gertrude does keep her word. She does not tell Claudius that Hamlet's madness is an act, but only tells him that Hamlet accidentally killed Polonius and even wept over it. Hamlet's trust in his mother was well placed. And from this point on, we sense a mending of the previously strained mother son relationship. In Scene 2, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern find Hamlet in another part of the castle, but are not able to get Hamlet to tell them what he has done with Polonius's body. Rosencrantz says, "What have you done, my lord, with the dead body?" Hamlet says, "Compounded it with dust, whereto 'tis kin." Rosencrantz says, "Tell us where 'tis, that we may take it thence and bear it to the chapel." Hamlet says, "Do not believe it." That's a strange response. Do not believe it. Rosencrantz says, "Believe what?" Hamlet explains, "That I can keep your counsel and not mine own." Or in other words, that I can follow your advice about Polonius's body and not protect my own interests or keep my own secrets. Besides, to be demanded of a sponge, what replication or reply should be made by the son of a king? Whoa, Hamlet is pulling rank. Who are you to be ordering the Prince of Denmark around? So much for being old school chums. In the vast scheme of things, Hamlet is the Prince of Denmark, and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are at the other end of the evolutionary chain. They are as insignificant as sponges. Hamlet refuses to disclose the location of Polonius's body, but demands Rosencrantz and Guildenstern take him to the king. And that ends scene two. Scene three opens with Claudius considering the delicacy of the situation. He plans on sending Hamlet away, but must do so carefully because it turns out Hamlet is very much loved of the people, who could react badly if they think Hamlet is being misused, even by the king. Claudius must hide his intents on Hamlet's life, not only from Gertrude, but from the populace. This is a problem Claudius cannot afford to not address, but must address it in a way that he is absolved of any blame. This is quite a needle to thread. Hamlet is now brought before Claudius, and here begins some wonderfully dark humor. The king asks him, "Now, Hamlet, where's Polonius?" Hamlet says, "Not where he eats, but where he is eaten." Oh, yeah, Polonius is at supper, all right, but he's not eating. He's the main course. A certain convocation of politic worms are eaten at him, or in other words, are even now at him. They are eating him. Yes. Your worm, he goes off in a philosophical bent, your worm is your only emperor for diet. So he's going to put now, interestingly, after he has just told Rosencrantz and Guildenstern that they are as far beneath him as a sponge because he's the Prince of Denmark, he's now going to flip that around and say that the worm, which would normally be very low on the food chain, is actually at the top of the food chain. And that's what he means when he says your worm is your only emperor for diet. We fat all creatures else to fat us, and we fat ourselves for maggots. Your fat king and your lean beggar is but variable service. Two dishes, but to one table. That's the end. So we as humans are busy fattening all other creatures for us to eat, and yet we fatten ourselves to be eaten of worms. And then he says that a fat king and a lean beggar are but two dishes on the same table, and that table is the one of death. And that's why he says that's the end. They will both come to the same end, the king and the beggar, and they will both be food for worms. The king says, "Alas, alas." And Hamlet says, "A man may fish with the worm that hath eat of a king, and eat of the fish that hath fed of that worm." Yes, that could happen. A king could be eaten by worms, and then one of those worms caught and used on a hook to catch a fish. The fish now eats the worm which had eaten the king, and the beggar now eats the fish that he has caught using that worm. The king asks him, "What dost thou mean by this?" And Hamlet muses, "Nothing, but to show you how a king may go a progress through the guts of a beggar." Under the guise of his madness, Hamlet is being very disrespectful to the king, but he will go even further in his disrespect. The king asks him directly now, "Where is Polonius?" Hamlet says, "In heaven. Send thither to see. If your messenger find him not there, seek him in the other place yourself." And we all know what the other place is. Yeah, HE double hockey sticks. And he doesn't say to send your messengers to seek him in the other place if they don't find him in heaven. Hamlet says, "You, King Claudius, can go seek him in hell yourself. But if indeed you find him not within this month, you shall nose him." Yeah, that means smell him. "You shall nose him as you go up the stairs into the lobby." So Hamlet gives away where he has stowed Polonius's body. The king says to his attendants, "Go seek him there." And Hamlet tells them they don't have to hurry because he will stay till you come. Then the attendants exit to go find Polonius's body. Now Claudius tells Hamlet the ship is ready for Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to take him to England as quickly as possible. Claudius tells Hamlet the reason for the speedy voyage is to get Hamlet out of town before the bad news breaks that he killed Polonius. But the real reason Claudius has for sending Hamlet to England is that Hamlet will never return. This is a one-way trip as far as Claudius is concerned. Claudius thinks his purpose is hidden from Hamlet, but Hamlet knows perfectly well what Claudius is about. The king says, Hamlet, this deed, you're killing Polonius, this deed, for thine especial safety, must send thee hence with fiery quickness. Therefore, prepare thyself. The bark is ready, that's the ship. The bark is ready, and the wind at help. The associates tend, which are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who are going to take him, the associates tend, and everything is bent for England. Hamlet says, for England. The king says, I, Hamlet. Hamlet says, good. The king says, so is it, if thou knewest our purposes. And of course, the king thinks his purposes, his real purposes in sending Hamlet to England, are hidden from Hamlet. But Hamlet says, I see a cherub that sees them. So, in other words, I may not see your intent directly, but I can see a cherub up in heaven who sees exactly what it is that you're about. Hamlet says, but come, for England. Farewell, dear mother. Now, Gertrude is not in the scene. He's addressing Claudius when he says, farewell, dear mother. And Claudius corrects him, thy loving father, Hamlet. And Hamlet says, my mother. Father and mother is man and wife. Man and wife is one flesh. And so, my mother. Come, he says to the others, for England. And then he exits. After Hamlet leaves with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, Claudius has another brief soliloquy in which he makes it quite clear that his plan is to send Hamlet to England and have England take care of him, so that Claudius's hands will be clean of Hamlet's death. The king says to his attendants right after Hamlet leaves, follow him at foot, tempt him with speed aboard, delay it not. I'll have him hence tonight. Away, for everything is sealed and done that else leans on the affair. Pray you, make haste. Then all but the king exit. And the king says, and England, which is the king of England, kings were often referred to just by the name of their state, such as England being the king of England or Denmark being the king of Denmark. But Claudius says, and England, if my love thou holdst at aught, thou mayest not coldly set our sovereign process, which imports at full by letters congruing to that effect the present death of Hamlet. There we have it out in the open. No one can dispute now that this is what Claudius is about. He then says, do it, England, or the king of England. Do it, England, for like the hectic in my blood he rages, and thou must cure me. Till I know 'tis done, or till Hamlet's dead, till I know 'tis done, howe'er my haps, my joys will ne'er begin. And then Claudius exits the stage at the end of scene 3. Remember, at this time, England is a vassal state to Denmark, and the king of England must do whatever the king of Denmark commands. So now we know that the plan for Hamlet's death has something to do with the letters that are being sent to England's king along with Hamlet. And these letters are sealed so that they may be read by no one but the king of England himself upon their arrival in England. That is what Claudius means when he says, everything is sealed and done that else leans on the affair. Is Claudius really sending Hamlet to England with a sealed letter commanding the king of England to do away with Hamlet? It is starting to sound that way. And yet Hamlet appears to be going voluntarily on this last voyage with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. What will happen next? Will Hamlet escape this royal trap? It seems that Claudius has his own version of the mousetrap. And if Hamlet is to escape it, how will he do so? All these questions will be answered in due time, but for now, this is the end of the episode. You may have noticed there is no line we are memorizing this evening. That's because I am unable to find one line short and pithy enough in these 3 scenes to fit the bill. Although I do very much like the discourse about worms and how a king may go a progress through the guts of a beggar. Well, that's about all for tonight. Please hit the like button. Also, please hit the subscribe button. Please leave a comment below as to what you think about this episode. I want to thank all of you who have gone to brushupyourshakespeare.org and made a donation to the show. Your donations will keep Brush Up Your Shakespeare coming to you on a regular basis. And please join me again next time for Brush Up Your Shakespeare. Thanks for watching. Good night, all.